By the time Jurassic World Dominion concluded its run, the prehistoric beasts were no longer confined to remote islands. They were living in our backyards, mingling with modern human civilization. While Dominion cleared $1 billion at the box office, it also received mostly negative reviews. Critics argued that making dinosaurs a global commonality had diluted the primal, claustrophobic terror that defined the early films. Universal Pictures faced a specific creative hurdle. They had to figure out how to take a franchise that had become a global safari and return it to the isolation of a horror movie. When narrative expansion breaks the tension, it often demands a systemic reset, pulling the focus away from the world and back to a single point of failure. The studio started this reset by looking backward. They brought in David Koepp, the writer who penned the original 1993 script, to engineer a completely new storyline. To execute Koepp's vision, they hired Gareth Edwards, a director who built his reputation on bringing a heavy sense of physical scale and grounded realism to massive blockbusters. To move past the sprawling scope of the previous trilogy, the studio made a deliberate bet that the path forward for the IP involved stripping the narrative down to its essential skeletal structure. The first structural change was deleting the global sandbox. The script relocates the action to Île-Saint-Hubert, an abandoned, geographically isolated research facility in the Atlantic Ocean. The narrative narrows to a clinical mission. A team led by an expert operative must extract biomaterial from 3 specific prehistoric species that are essential for the development of a new human heart disease treatment. That focused mission quickly derails when the extraction team is forced into a rescue operation, picking up a shipwrecked civilian family stranded on the same coastline. By trapping a small, under-equipped group of professionals and civilians on a remote island, the writers severely restricted the narrative variables. There is nowhere to run, and no global military force coming to save them. This geographical containment pulls the story away from hollow spectacle and refocuses the lens tightly on character-driven survival horror. To match that gritty narrative reset, Edwards rejected the modern industry standard of digital green screen volumes, opting instead for grueling, practical filmmaking. The production shot the movie entirely on Kodak 35mm film stock, forcing a distinct 1990s color palette directly into the camera. They paired that analog film with vintage Panavision anamorphic lenses to capture the specific optical imperfections and visual textures of the era. Instead of relying on CGI backgrounds, the crew spent weeks hauling heavy equipment through the humid, insect-filled tropical rainforests to capture the jungle sequences. For aquatic sequences, actors endured intense physical punishment on hydraulic rigs inside water tanks in Malta, battered by water cannons to simulate open ocean chaos. Enduring that actual physical suffering in real environments translates directly to the screen, providing a subconscious, inescapable layer of authenticity for the viewer. While the filmmaking techniques look to the past, the lore introduced in Rebirth pushed the property into its darkest, most chaotic territory to date. The abandoned InGen facility on Île-Saint-Hubert functioned as a literal graveyard, housing the horrific, failed genetic experiments the company had buried to protect its public image. The characters stumble upon grotesque creations, including multi-headed embryos suspended in test tubes, and chaotic raptor pterosaur genetic splices known as mutodons. The apex predator of this facility is the Distortus rex. It features a bulbous skull and 6 limbs, designed so its erratic movements evoke pity and constant physical pain rather than simple menace. These mutant creatures operate as visceral, living manifestations of the franchise's central theme: the grotesque, unpredictable consequences of corporate greed. Despite an estimated $225 million budget, Rebirth generated over $869 million globally. It also secured an Academy Award nomination for Best Visual Effects, becoming the series' first Oscar-recognized film since 1997. That overwhelming financial and industry success contrasted sharply with a divided critical reception. Reviews split exactly down the middle, with detractors arguing the film relied too heavily on nostalgic cliches. General audiences largely ignored those critical complaints. They prioritized the execution of a well-made, tension-filled thrill ride over highbrow cinema. By grossing nearly $1 billion, Rebirth proves that in an entertainment landscape obsessed with sprawling cinematic universes, the most effective storytelling choice is often the simplest. You trap vulnerable humans on an island with monsters, and you remind the audience exactly how it feels to be hunted.